Hello and welcome to the Futurist Letters Show. My name is Cairo Smith. I am the founder and editor-in-chief of the Futurist Letters Journal, which you can find at futuristletters.com. This is an interview episode of the Futurist Letters Show, so the whole episode is going to be free to watch and listen to. You can find it on YouTube, Substack, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and we are also going to have an after-show episode, just myself and my co-host, for paying subscribers. You can go and find that at futuristletters.com. So please, if you enjoy the episode, consider becoming a paying subscriber for just a few bucks a month. You can keep this content going, and you can see that after-show chat where we talk about how it went. My co-host for this episode is Kenny White.
What's up, guys?
And we are very pleased to have a demographer from the Institute for Family Studies, a man from Kentucky, a man who is very well read, has a lot of interesting ideas, someone whose content I've enjoyed for quite a while now online, and I am so excited to get the chance to talk to him. Lyman Stone. Lyman, welcome to the show.
It's good to be with you, and I'm excited for the your post-show interview to know how I did. I assume you'll be like grading me or something. Or
we really grade ourselves, I think. Yeah, we usually go on and we're like, man, we screwed that up.
This guest was a C minus.
There's no such thing as a bad guest, only a bad interviewer.
Yes, that's very true.
Great. Good to know.
So tell us and tell the audience a little bit for the uninitiated what you do and why.
So I'm a demographer, which means I study populations. So classically, we think of that as births, deaths, migration, and sometimes we'll throw marriage in there as kind of a population process or vital statistic. So that's what I do. I do that kind of on three different hats. I'm the director of the Pronatalism Initiative at the Institute for Family Studies. That's a think tank research organization. We try to educate people about demography, family formation, policy, stuff like that. Then I also am a forecaster. Lots of people like to bet on poly market, which is legal in America once again. I don't know if we've all heard that.
Hallelujah. I definitely was not using it the whole time that it was banned.
No,
not at all.
Of course not.
Great.
Okay. So people do that, but the problem with prediction markets is if your predictions are really good, why would you reveal them in a public market? You would sell them privately to people who have a lot of skin in the game. So that's actually what I do. I sell forecasts to companies that make stuff for moms and babies. And then I also am an academic, and I publish academically on exciting things like measuring Amish birth rates or measuring ultra-Orthodox birth rates, or really just measuring birth rates is like, right. Or measuring survey questions. I also publish on survey measurement, so lots of measurement in my academic work.
Okay,
so that's
surveys
what I do.
Relating to demographics, I imagine.
Yeah, basically when we ask people questions about their desired or ideal or preferred family size, we there's always the worry that like maybe people are just kind of giving us crap. Like they say, "Oh, I want 5 kids," but like, do you really? So there's like that kind of worry.
So about like revealed preferences, right? Do you think that it's valid to describe family sizes in terms of revealed preferences?
Yeah, it can be. It certainly can be. So I mean, like your classic revealed preference is like you go to the store, like you've got a survey taker at the entrance to Walmart, and they say, "Hey, which do you like better, apples or oranges?" And they say, "Oh, I like apples better." But then they go in and the apples are 25 cents an apple. The oranges are 25 cents an apple. But then they choose oranges. Okay. And you're like, but you said you like apples. They're like, well, I know an apple a day keeps the doctor away, but oranges are so sweet and tangy. I really, so it's a revealed preference. They say they like apples, but actually they buy the oranges. Now, calculating revealed preferences in like the real world is way more complicated because first of all, products aren't equivalent. So like if I ask you like, which would you like better, a good job or a loving spouse? You might answer can't I have both? In fact, both aren't those correlated with each other? Like, probably don't people with better jobs have an easier time getting spouses? So you actually aren't always facing trade-offs. Secondly, there are impossible choices. So like, if I ask you if you want something, you might just answer like, that's physically impossible. Like, would you rather be 8 feet tall or have blue skin? Like,
there's like a Is this James Cameron asking this question?
Both. I would like to be both.
I think that people do hit a limit with their like conditional hypotheticals, right? Where they just give up trying to.
But you get real problems with this with fertility, because you say like, well, if people really wanted these kids, they would have them. You say, well, look, like, let's say a guy is like, I want to have 5 kids. If all having a kid means is producing offspring, this is so easy. Go to a sperm bank, give a crap ton of sperm, wait 15 years, you'll have 5 kids. Okay? But we all know that that's not what it means to have kids. When people say they want to have kids, what they mean is they want to be part of a family, bonded by bonds of love, and that family contains 5 children of which they are the parent and with whom they have an ongoing relationship. Okay? Once you realize that, you realize, oh, that's not just their choice. That is also a spouse's choice. There's also economic constraints. There's biological constraints. There are information problems. Maybe they thought they could start having kids at 35 and still have 5 kids. But guess what? No, you can't. It's very difficult if you start that late. But they might have information errors. So once you actually start to think about how revealed preferences would actually work out with family, there are local cases where you can say, oh, you said you wanted this, but you actually chose this. You're clearly full of crap. But actually, in general, revealed preferences as like a working model is pretty misleading about markets where a lot of the choice sets are coordination problems, right? Yes, I really would like this, but it requires someone else to coordinate with me. Okay. So when markets are fundamentally like coordination issues, or when there's a lot of externalities, like most of the benefits of having a child go to wider society, not the parent, right? Or actually they go to the child themselves. The benefit of existing is primarily for the person who exists. So when you get these kinds of situations, you realize that that revealed preference models are at minimum going to be extremely difficult to formulate.
I almost see them, and this does seem to be a risk, especially with online discourse. There seems to be a sort of Dunning-Kruger level of understanding of a lot of these terms of art, where people learn them and then they just start using them as cudgels, right? Like, if you're like a very grouchy, like pronatalist and you're trying to blame people for not having kids, and those people go, I want more kids, it's just my material conditions.
If you really wanted them, you would have them. If you really
wanted them, you would have them. Revealed preference.
You could just be Amish.
You could. And
it's you could just. What I'm saying is, like, yes, I really want them, but the price, the quote unquote price I would have to pay in terms of the choices I would have to make about who I married, or the sacrifices I would have to make, is either sufficiently high or I cannot find a counterparty. Okay, so sometimes it's like I would pay, but like there are times where a market doesn't have a counterparty, right? Yeah. Like recently I was wanting to place a bet on something and there was no one to take the counter. Even though technically the odds were pretty even, there was no active.
If I knew there was no active counterparty was Lyman Stone, I just would, even if I believed it, I would change my beliefs.
Well, there's a reason I don't bet under my own name. Okay, so but regardless, so I mean, this is like you really can't just apply this kind of revealed preference model. Now, what you can do is you can sometimes say like, well, what are we hoping to get at when we talk about preferences? Okay, like what do we mean by a preference? Well, we mean something that like if you don't achieve it, like you will have a negative welfare effect. Okay, so like you will be less satisfied or less happy or like less well off in some like util counting kind of sense, right?
All things being equal, you would prefer X
Yes.
kids.
So sometimes we can get at that, even if we can't get at the actual choice parameter. And the way we can do that is we can be like, okay, like what happens? Like, let's say people conceive a child. What happens if they have a miscarriage to their self-rated happiness? Does it go up or down? Surprise, it goes down. Mm-hmm. Like, this actually will shock no one, but this is actually kind of theoretically important once you realize, like, if it is the case that like the marginal child,
like if it is the case that people do point out, right, is like the incongruity between the relative ambivalent importance of adding an extra child and the like almost unmeasurable suffering, right, of taking the child away.
Well, another one is, we can see this in IVF. So when people go in for IVF, some people it succeeds. Some people it succeeds very quickly. Some people it succeeds with more time. And what we can see is the longer it takes for IVF to work for you, and in particular, if you're not able to have a child with IVF at all, like if you just have failed round after failed round, the more likely you are to report depressive symptoms, and the likelier you are to end up having like antidepressants prescribed to you. And we can see this now. It used to be that to show this, we had to appeal to like this Swedish data set, but now someone recently demonstrated an Australian data set as well, that like failed IVF leads to pretty significant, like almost a doubling of rates of antidepressant prescription. Now, people say, well, but IVF users are people who like really want a kid. And I'm like, yes, that's the point. When people say they want a kid, that is, they go and they start pursuing the process, and they don't have it, it makes them quite sad. Now you can say, okay, but most people who say they want a kid don't do IVF.
Yes.
Some of that is because they don't have enough money
for them.
Yeah, some of them, they don't have enough money or they have religious objections. But we can see the same thing among people who have a miscarriage, right? That they have a big loss of happiness that sticks around for quite a while. We can also actually just see the same thing if we look at young people, like in their teens and 20s, and we ask them, how many kids do you want to have? And then we follow up with them in longitudinal data like 30 years later. We can see that the people who end up with fewer kids than they say they wanted are a little bit less happy than the people who end up with the number they say they wanted. The interesting thing is the people who end up happiest are the people who end up with more kids than they said they wanted. Now that sounds weird. I'm not like making a pitch for unintended pregnancy here.
Okay.
Mostly what's happening is in the long run. So most unintended pregnancy is actually not like a person who only wanted one kid having a second kid. Most unintended pregnancy is people having that first kid way earlier than they wanted, or not in the circumstances.
In my experience, I know these people.
Yeah,
and so they're obsessed with their kids now. I mean, they really are.
So yeah. But so when people end up with genuinely more kids than they initially said they wanted, like imagine a 17-year-old who says, I want 2 kids. But then when they're 40, they ended up with 3 kids. Why did they end up with 3 kids? It's usually because they fell in love faster, got married younger, and had a happier life than they intended.
I've heard this, and I think I've read things like this in your work, that most of the total fertility rate drop can be explained by not people wanting fewer kids, but people starting the child having process later, and then just sort of hitting the end of the line quicker as a result with fewer total children. Is that right?
Once people get married, the pace at which they, pull the goalie and start trying to crank out babies has not changed. Not much. That is, people who are in a position to make kids, they're trying to make them. It's that a lot of people are not in a position to make kids.
Do we see people who don't go to college having more kids because they start their adult lives earlier?
That used to be the case. It used to be the case that like lower socioeconomic status people had more kids. That is becoming less and less the case all the time. There's also some like latent kind of racial, religious, cultural stratification there that can make analysis complicated. But like within racial groups now, there's not that much of a difference in kind of family size progression. In some countries now, highly educated people have slightly more kids. In some, the gradient is still negative. In the US, it's kind of getting kind of flattish. Though obviously a lot of things depend on how you choose to measure it, because there are a lot of different ways to measure these issues. So what's going on for kind of lower socioeconomic status people is, okay, yeah, they don't go to school, but quelle surprise, not getting an education is not a pathway to success in 21st century America. And as a result, they struggle to form long-term stable relationships, get married, buy a house, all the types of things that people tend to visualize and expect as part of that family package.
And without those milestones, they feel less ready to start the child rearing process.
Exactly. And remember, this goes back to what I was saying before about, like, what do people mean when they say they want to have kids? They don't just mean they want to know that their genetic material is out there somewhere. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, they want a whole package. They want to be part of a family that has certain traits. And those traits are not just kids. They're often a home. They're often a car. They're, a certain number of vacations a year. Different people have different things. If you're Amish, it's a certain type of barn. Okay. Different people are going on different things. These are different cultural values. But at the end of the day, the fact that when people say they want kids, they don't mean they want kids in total isolation, does not mean that their desire for kids is like fake. Like saying, I want to have kids isn't fake just because when I say I have kids, I also mean I want to be in love with their mother.
I want to pull this out just a little bit for the sake of people who are maybe not followers of this, and just ask, why is this important? Well, it's sort of like you said you wear multiple hats. I can sense two things in you. I can sense the analytical, which is just the pure demographic study of fertility with absolutely no value placed on an outcome. And there's also obviously the side that cares about humanity, the humanist side that wants children to continue existing, right? And for things to not collapse. So I guess for each of those, why is it important? Why do we do this? Why do we care?
Yeah, on the analytics side, fertility is not going up. It is in fact generally going down. So that is a key reason why we care about this, because birth rates are going down. And that'll have all kinds of economic consequences.
Is this unprecedented?
It is. Historically, there have been times where birth rates fell, but also historically, most of the time when birth rates fell in the past, that was really just because child mortality rates were falling and people target surviving family size. So as fewer kids were dying, they didn't need to have as many kids and they had the same family size. What we're seeing in the last 20 years is, I'm not going to say it's totally unprecedented, but it is a particularly dramatic event where fertility rates are falling almost everywhere in the world without respect to child survival in any sense. And they're falling to quite uniquely low levels. South Korea is like 0.7. The US, like lots of countries are at record lows, and not just record lows for children born per woman, but record lows for surviving children born per woman. That is, you've got places where it's not just that the fertility rate is lower, it's that the fertility rate after child mortality is lower, which is impressive since sometimes in the sample, we're talking about surviving children during smallpox epidemics or during yellow fever epidemic. Like, we're talking about times where people really were having more surviving offspring in terrible epidemics than they are now. So that's pretty striking.
I have a cool question.
Yeah.
The way you're describing this, like what's happening with fertility, especially with like surviving children per women, it sounds like it's almost like if you didn't know anything about the modern world and you were just looking at this statistic and you looked at other periods where it dipped as much as it has now, you'd be like, oh, there's a war, there's a famine, there's like a massive epidemic, there's some kind of massive crisis happening.
Yes.
But when I open my eyes and I look around society, like I don't see the crisis. Like, is there like some hidden crisis that we're all missing? Like, are we going like what is happening in the world right now that could possibly, is it a crisis? Is there some massive problem, or is this some sort of slow structural shift in our species?
There are a lot of people who believe that we are in the middle of an epochal existential crisis. What that means varies by person. Maybe it's a crisis. Maybe it's a climate crisis. Maybe it's the decline of the post World War II international order. Maybe it's the housing crisis. Maybe it's any number of things. I think what we're actually is we're in a crisis. We're in a crisis of people thinking they have a crisis, when maybe they don't. That's not to say there's not bad things. Okay, there are bad things in the world, but I think on most standards, we're living in a very good time. I would say the one area where there is actually a real, I don't want to say crisis, but a quite remarkable statistical deviation from historic trend is the odds that your child will share your values. Okay, so like throughout almost all of human history, provided your kid lives, like they're overwhelmingly likely to share your values, your religion, your whatever. That is not the case now. We are living through a really fascinating deviation from the historic norm of successful intergenerational transmission of values. That being the case, I mean, how does that relate to fertility? I'm not totally sure, but I do know that there are people who seem to have a lot of anxiety about whether their children will share their values. But I don't think that's the main explanation for fertility decline.
That may lead, although we don't know for sure, to some people not valuing a family as much as they would if they were more sure that the child would be a continuation of their values.
Think about the family package, right?
Yeah.
What do people really want? They don't just want their genetic material out in the world. They don't just want to snuggle a baby for a few years. Ultimately, most people want their children to grow up and be people that they like and that like them, right? Like some people be like, oh, I want my children to be happy. But there's very few people who are like, and I would be totally fine if my kid's version of happiness means they hate on me and spit on everything I believe.
Right.
Like that's almost no one's vision of like the good outcome.
Yeah.
So if you think that the odds that your children are going to share your beliefs are low, it might motivate some pessimism about family. Now, I'm not going to say this is like the number one explanation. I just think it's interesting that like of all the things where there like really is something new happening, this kind of is it.
I want to ask something a little speculative as well, so hopefully you'll go with me there. You hinted at this a little with the Amish and the ultra-Orthodox, in that there are certain more siloed cultures, usually religious, pretty much always religious, cultural groups that have these like aberrantly high fertility rates because of their values and the way their societies are set up. I've heard some people speculate, and I found it compelling, that we are in the middle of a massive, basically, like evolutionary event through voluntary sexual selection, where the type of human being, like the profile of their psyche in a few hundred years, will just be absurdly different, because we are basically dead-ending so many types of human and over-selecting for more. Do you see this potentially happening? Do you see humans being in a very rapid genetic transformation as a result of these trends?
Short answer is no.
Okay.
And it's not that it couldn't happen.
Okay.
Selection on fertility is definitely a thing that can happen. But it doesn't actually seem to be happening. And what I mean by that is we have like GWAS type studies that try and figure out like what genes are being selected for. Okay.
Right.
And there are a few that show up. We can also compare those genes to like ancient DNA of historic samples. We can say like, oh, okay, if these genes predict higher fertility today, maybe they predicted higher fertility in the past.
Yeah.
Spoiler, no, they don't. That is, the genes that predicted higher fertility 2,000 years ago are not the genes that predict higher fertility today. Now, that's not super shocking. Okay, because like, culture selects for different things. In fact, you can even see changes in various like PGS polygenic scores and how they relate to fertility. You can see changes in their predictiveness within the last century. Okay. So like PGS scores for education didn't predict fertility for like people who are like 90 or 100 today. They did predict fertility in a negative way for people who are like 60, 70 today, 80. And then they like didn't predict fertility for people who are like in their 50s today. Okay.
Fascinating.
In the US. Or like the PGS score for homosexuality predicted more babies for people who came of age before contraception and fewer babies for people who came of age after contraception, because it's really related to like risk tolerance.
Interesting.
So, you can see these very local effects. The problem is, if you do these GWAS studies, you look for genes associated with fertility, and you do them across, 20 different industrialized countries, you will find genes in every country that are being selected for. The problem is, they're not the same genes. Okay? So think of it this way. Ultra-Orthodox Jews are clearly a group that has some, a range of different genes, so much so that they do like prenatal genetic testing for
because they have
conditions,
certain genetic conditions.
Yeah, like founder effects and stuff like that. Yeah. Amish people almost certainly have very different genes. Okay, they do. They have.
Don't
like,
they have like polydactyly? Isn't that an Amish condition?
Yeah. There's like different, so like very different genes. If you were to take another group, Roma, quote unquote gypsies in Europe, who also have very high fertility, you would find a very different set of genes. Okay, and there are studies. If you were to look at Lestadian Lutherans in Finland, another very high fertility group, you will find different genes there too. Okay, what's going on is when you get cultural selection, which is a real thing, it does select for genes because there are genes associated with cultures, but that is unlikely to cause wide-scale genetic transformation for the simple reason that it's not actually that those genes are causing the fertility difference. Okay. And we know that because there's not a gene related to fertility that's consistent across the Amish, the ultra-Orthodox Jews, the Lestadians, the Roma, all, whatever, all these different groups, which tells us at some point these groups get big enough that they start to bump into each other. Okay. Basically, they start to have sex with each other. And when that happens, it's not like there's a shared genotype of like the Amish girl and the ultra-Orthodox boy, and they sneak off into the woods and they have a baby. And now, like, no, these are totally different genotypes. There's not like a consistent fertility gene, and they're just going to come into conflict with each other at some point, right? So no, there won't be this like pronatal genetic drift. And there's a lot of kind of deep genetic reasons for why there won't be like a long run fertility drift due to how we think about fitness, even at its most basic level. But now what will happen is the cultural norms that are passed on will change. The
meme
at the same time,
as it were.
Yeah. At the same time, culture changes for many reasons. Like the Amish are actually surprisingly flexible. So, the Amish are not opposed to all new technology. Just whenever there's a new technology, they decide, is this good for the community or bad for the community? And they vote on it. As long as there are English around the Amish to develop vaccines, and a lot of Amish people get vaccines, or medicines or whatever, or pave roads, the Amish will continue to allow the English to do those things. But if there were no English around to do those things, I suspect the Amish would start to grow more tolerant on the education needed to provide those goods. And as they did that, their fertility would fall. Okay. So, there's endogeneity here that means that a lot of these highly pronatal cultures have real scaling challenges.
That makes sense. That does. I'm curious. Go ahead, Kenny.
Oh, I just said I like the concept of a lot of these pronatal groups, like the ultra Orthodox or the Amish, possibly the Roma as well. You can point to parts of their culture that work at a small scale as like a bubble inside of a larger like culture, but once you inflate that bubble to be like the whole culture, like perhaps there's something about like the larger culture that has to be the way it is in order for it to be the larger culture.
Well, and there's actually an argument that it is the very small scaleness of these cultures that is their pronatalism, okay? That because they are quote unquote small scale, they cause people's social worlds to be filled with like kin, basically, like people who reinforce kin identity as really, really important. So for example, Roma who live in like 85% Roma neighborhoods or higher, these like, ethnic quote unquote ghettos, have much higher fertility than Roma who live outside of those neighborhoods. And it's not just that they have higher fertility. Roma who live in highly Roma neighborhoods are more likely to give their children distinctively Roma names. Okay. So, what we're seeing
genetic,
is like,
but it is cultural. And I would
exactly.
assume almost every Roma
but the point is
not, in the ghettoized community or whatever you want to call it, is being absorbed into, I would assume, like Western cosmopolitan superculture. Right.
And so what we see is that like the pronatalism of these cultures is dependent on sort of the small scaleness of them. They really struggle to scale up. And you can even see this.
So do you think that a Roma country would not be able to sustain the birth rates of the current Roma communities, even if it was ethnically homogenous?
No, I don't think it would. No.
Interesting.
I think it'd probably have higher fertility than Spain.
Sure.
Okay. But no, I don't think it would have quote unquote Roma typical fertility rates. And I think you can see this in Israel, right? Israel has way higher fertility rates than other countries, but it does not have ultra Orthodox Jewish typical rates.
No. And it's the ultra Orthodox are really buoying the fertility of Israel on the average too.
They are to some extent, yeah. But even secular Jews in Israel have like 1.9.
It's like a little over 2, right?
So. I think it's fallen a little bit in the last couple of years, but yeah, it's around 2. It's so what? Whereas in the U.S., secular Jews have like less than 1 on average.
What happens? What happens if it keeps going down like this, and what happens if it gets even worse? Like, what does the 21st century look like?
Really sad. So we talked about kind of like the analytic future, and then there's kind of the human concern. And this is really what actually motivates me is people are like, oh, there will be economic decline. Yes. Okay, fair. There will be, problems with intergenerational transfers and stuff like that. Yeah, it's true. There will be less innovation because fewer like young people to innovate. Yeah, that's correct. There will be that. All fair, all true. Yes, stipulated. It's not that I'm saying those are not bad things, but to me, the real tragedy is that there will just be so many people living lives of disappointment and unfulfillment. People who dreamed of marrying and having kids and didn't until it was too late. And a society where just everyone is just sadder is bad on its face. Even if it made us a lot richer, it would be bad. And by the way, I think it's possible that the economic problems we're going to get through, AI might enable us to automate away some of the need for workers. We're a very innovative society. I don't think that the economy is just going to like collapse. Okay. I don't think that's going to happen. The economy did not actually collapse during the bubonic plague. Okay. Like
really,
like
I think
exchange
the
continued.
Top consensus is it did, right? So what do you mean when you say it didn't?
I mean, economic exchange continued.
Yeah.
People still farmed. People still sold their goods at market. It was terrible, but like you can knock off 30% of the population in horrible agony. And it's terrible. I'm not saying it's good, but like civilization actually does continue. And you can see this in plague after plague throughout human history. I mean, just look at like the seasonal, like smallpox epidemics in London and stuff. Like society can take a hit, get chewed up and move on.
It's you were talking about
it's miserable
propagating. This is all, you could almost call it like a memetic plague, right? Like it's like cultural ideas that are causing sterility. in a sense.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Yeah, it is. It is a memetic plague, so to speak. But I think my point is just like, I'm less worried about the kind of material consequences than many people, many pronatalists even are, because science is freaking awesome. Like, we're probably going to solve a lot of the technical problems. And you know what? We're probably going to get better reproductive health so that like people can continue having like maybe one kid late in life or something, or at least rich people. But the cultural malaise that drives people to feel burdened by real or illusory crises, to feel burdened by unreasonable expectations, to be, you know, unintelligible to the opposite sex or uninterested in the opposite sex. These are a deeper problem because they simply result in a sad society, and there's no tech fix for sad. There just isn't.
Do you find yourself, and Kenny, just cut me off whenever you want to jump in on this. Do you find yourself, Lyman, considering like the Fermi paradox and the idea that there could be some great filter ahead of us as far as becoming an interstellar civilization?
Is the great filter that all civilizations reach a point where they simply become decadent, cease to breed, and they become unable to sustain the scale of a technological civilization?
Yeah. It sounds a little dramatic when you put it that way.
Do I wonder this every 7 to 14 days? Yes, I do. Like, it seems possible. Let's say that.
Any sufficiently advanced civilization becomes existentially sad and
masturbatory.
I feel like there's a natural, what gives me hope, because I mean, we are now 14 years past peak births, and obviously like I believe in an expansive humanity. I actually I feel like for me, I feel emotionally like I'm on a team with all Earth life. Like if it has DNA, I feel like we sort of share a cause. You know, I would just like seed archaea bacteria to like other planets. If they can live there, like I support them going to colonize. Wherever they can.
You're like, panspermia might not be real for Earth, but we're gonna do it elsewhere.
Yeah, we're gonna do it. We're gonna sperm it up all over.
There's like a couple of craters on Mars, I think, where they think like some.
They think they might have accidentally put archaea bacteria or something.
Oh, dude, yeah? We should.
I don't know.
We should totally
maybe.
I'm all for life pollution.
The thing is, the thing for me that makes me not freak out about this as like an X risk is that I feel like if the population of Earth gets low enough, there's going to be this rubber band effect where decadence is just like functionally impossible just because there are too few people, right? And then like we sort of start going back up again. I don't know.
So the challenge with that, well, I would say, first of all, yeah, I think a breeding population of humans will survive no matter what, though they may eventually face selection pressures that render them not highly recognizable as humans.
Wow.
But I mean, you can see this in human history. I mean, like Homo erectus is, I guess, recognizable as human, but he's quite different. Kind of very ancient Homo sapiens is quite different.
I think it's obvious that if we hadn't exterminated... What's that, Kenny?
The Homo erectus guy would stick out on this podcast. If we had
he would stick out.
An extra guest and he was Homo erectus, we'd be like, I don't know if you're a human, dude.
I would totally get Homo erectus
or like Homo florensis, like any of these other Homo species. A world where in 50,000 years we have deviated that much is not like hard to imagine, whether we are highly successful or unsuccessful as a species, right? You can imagine it going either way. Maybe we start genetically modifying ourselves and then we're very rapidly speciating in important ways.
Yeah. Then you get sort of a ship of Theseus almost. Yeah.
Yeah. But my point is, in some sense, it's uninteresting to say that like a breeding population will be sustained. I think the bigger question is, will will they maintain a civilization that we regard as admirable? And it does matter that we regard it as admirable because we're the ones making the choices right now.
Do you think
right?
we maintain a civilization that our forefathers would regard as admirable?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. I think virtually all of our forefathers would admire what we've done on the keeping people alive front, because they expended enormous effort with witch doctors and alchemists and doctors and any number of things trying to do it, and we did it. So I think we would get universal kudos from our ancestors. Likewise on like technical innovation, like they would almost universally look at cars and be like, oh my gosh, this is freaking amazing. This is so cool.
I feel like the founding
our
fathers would
houses
be really into a car.
There is almost no prior civilization that would look at our houses and be like, I'd rather have mine.
Sure.
Like, no, they will choose air conditioning every time and indoor plumbing every time.
There's a civilization in called the EU that literally doesn't choose air conditioning right now, though.
Look, I'm only talking about civilizations.
Okay, all right.
Not barbarian tribe. No,
like Kentucky. Copy.
No. But look, their reason is like their climate is supposedly historically temperate enough that they didn't need it. Okay.
Sure. So there might just be a lag effect on their cognition.
Sure. Yeah. Eventually it'll get hot enough. They will all worship at the altar of AC. And they'll love it. But the point is like, these are things that are almost, there's very few people who choose against these.
They're miraculous.
Now, on the front of like values, attitudes, there are a lot of historic civilizations that would look at the way we dress, the things we do in the bedroom, the attitudes we have about the hereafter, and would think very ill of us. To be honest, I think very ill of most of us on these bases because I'm a very conservative person. But I think that on some level, values and technology are never inevitably attached to one another. That is, you can swap one and have, that is for any given technology set or value set, there are multiple possibilities of the other. Yeah. And I think that, in general, you need a lot more you have to stand on a lot more other shoulders to get a given technology than to get a given value set. Okay. So like value sets, you can just have a new value set tomorrow. Right.
You can just say,
you actually don't even,
I'm the son of God, and go give a bunch of really charismatic speeches. And
yes, exactly. Right. You could do that. People have done it many times.
Yes.
Sometimes no one listens. Sometimes they do, pros and cons on each of those. But technology is a lot harder to just decide to have better of or different of tomorrow. Right. And so on some level, like, it's not that values come and go and technology is forever. That's not what I'm saying, but that like, you can take a hit on the values front and rebuild it a lot faster than if society had like a major technological regression. And we've had very few major technological regressions because, first of all, it's quite sticky in a way the values are less sticky.
Yeah.
And second of all, because most people recognize that like you can write the things in a book and a future generation can relearn the values.
Yeah.
But like once the bridge collapses, it takes so long to rebuild it.
I feel like looking at technology, especially modern technology, you get the sense that it's incredibly fragile and that it would be almost impossible. Like if we sort of let, I don't know, like modern semiconductor fabrication, like, if some country decided to kill everybody who knows how to like fabricate modern chips.
They find a gene that's widely held among all these people and also exposes them to like a genetic pathogen.
Yeah. Sure. Some targeted virus. This is like in a plot point of something I wrote that's coming out soon. So it's funny that we got into that. But No, I guess what I'm saying about the technology is, it's, to my knowledge at least, the actual technologies we've lost, you can almost count them on one hand, right? Like they're sort of famous. There's, Roman concrete, which we just rediscovered. There's Greek fire.
Greek
Like
fire.
it doesn't seem like we lose that many technologies that frequently.
It's very hard to lose them because people value them so much that they invest a lot of effort in not losing them.
Right. I want to ask you, because you said conservative, and I want to ask this in the abstract. I'm somebody, I consider like the continued existence of human civilization very important. I think a lot of people do if you like abstract it for them. From what I see culturally, and Kenny, if you see something different, please chime in. I feel like a lot of the natalism efforts are very wrapped up in cultural conservatism online and conservative political factionalism. And I almost see this sort of like reflexive opposition that comes out of that, where people who are opposed to some aspect of the big tent of cultural conservatism become almost like spiteful antinatalists out of sort of like a negative polarization. Do you think that sort of this intertwining of natalism and conservative values in the cultural consciousness could potentially even make this problem worse?
Yes, I think it is making it worse. I mean, particularly because these values, political polarization, increasingly our politics are polarizing around family. The difference in fertility rates between conservatives and liberals is getting bigger every election. The difference in marriage rates between conservatives and liberals is getting bigger every election. We are actually sorting politically on our family behaviors. And so increasingly, like, what does it mean to be a conservative? It just means you have kids or you want to have kids. Because this just is a conservative value in a way it wasn't in 1990, say. And people often, abortion, LGBT, climate change, liberals just incorporated a lot of things into their political coalition that coded in areas that supplied people reasons to look askance at the traditional family. Say, a family unit centered on reproduction, well, that's bad if you think people are bad for the climate. Well, that's bad if, that's kind of a threat to your identity if you're LGBT. Or LGBT, I guess.
I have a question. So in terms of like how these statistical trends are tracked, is that accounting for, say, like differences in age and differences?
Yeah, like within age. Yeah. Like if you look at
people will be more conservative.
But no, like if you look at people under 30, their politics are highly correlated with their desired family size. If you look at people ages like 40 to 50, so like a given cohort, their politics are highly correlated with like their completed family size. At any given age, you'll find this correlation, and it's getting stronger across the generations.
I see a sort
it's
of
because our politics are really about sex. Our politics are really about sex. Our politics are about sex, and then the winner of the argument about sex gets to decide which country we bomb. And like, that's American politics.
I'm going to push back on this a little, just from anecdotal evidence, which is the best and coolest kind of evidence.
I agree. It is.
Yes. Which is that I have friends here in Hollywood, in LA, who are openly gay or lesbian, who are committed to this lifestyle, who still place what seems like a fairly conservative value on having biological children and raising them, and basically using some sort of surrogate or sperm donor, acting out this tradition for the sake of their parents, for the sake of all this. Like, they're trying to synthesize these things It sounds like you're very skeptical of this. Do you see this as not a viable path for some portion of
I mean,
humanity?
Lesbian or gay married couples, same-sex married couples, do have kids.
Yeah.
They're not childless. On average, they have relatively few children. But they do have some kids.
Even accounting for their level of urbanization and education and all that.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's complicated. Gay men technically have infinitely more kids because you can't divide by number of women in that relationship when you count fertility by number of women. But gay men really don't add a ton of biological kids. Lesbian women, those families average slightly fewer kids than heterosexual families. But the thing you have to keep in mind is for lesbian women, you're dividing by 2 women, not 1.
Because you have 2 women. The way
so if a lesbian family has, so it is quite a bit lower fertility on average. If you there's ways you can try and deal with the gay man calculation problem, but none of them are very.
I'm imagining you guys at the
they're
institute
all very
just like going through the data, just like sweating, like all the president's men over
what do you
these
do?
Gay fertility rates.
But
I just picture the hrefs in like the spreadsheet where you're dividing by 0 and you're like, oh no, like how do I?
But like let's put it this way: at the Democratic National Convention, there was a mobile sterilization clinic. Okay, where you could go and get your vasectomy right there. Yeah. Like that's a whole vibe. Okay,
it is a
you can
vibe.
say it's Roe, you can say it's LGBT stuff, you can say it's climate change, whatever. But the point is, for whatever reason, all of the issues that make you skeptical of just having babies have coalesced on one side of our politics.
I'm going to ask.
Okay, like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that maybe because you are a fertility demographer, you are inclined to see politics through this? Like, if you were an industrial policy guy, would you be saying left and right is all about differences in industrial policy? Like when you're
no, I mean, sure, yes, okay. I think absolutely, I have a hammer, so everything's a nail. But also, I mean, it just is true that like marital status predicts like almost as much difference in voting behavior as like race does. Marital status predicts an enormous amount of deviation, and child number even more so. Like there are just not that many 6-child families voting for Democrats. There are some, but not that many.
I'm curious. I'm going to ask personally, as a mixed race person, as America gets more and more new like racial combinations of people just through like ethnic blending, do the ways we measure race traditionally become less salient or more difficult, or are they still relevant?
Yes. I mean, the fastest growing racial group in the US is multiracial. And then we like have people checking all these boxes and you're like, but like, what does this mean to you? Like, can anyone tell you're because and then you start to realize there's actually 2 different concepts that we squish together. There's colorism and there's ancestryism. Okay. So colorism is basically other people's judgment of what you are. Okay.
Phenotype
so
and
do
genotype.
You look like, well, it's not actually even that because colorism is obviously related. Like skin color is very genetic. But then ancestryism is both genotype, but it's also cultural stuff. Right. So like, you might not look like some given race, but maybe that's the cultural ancestry you've had. Maybe you had a white parent and an Indian parent and you're super light skinned, but you're also very Hindu. Okay. Like you might really strongly identify with your Hindu ancestry or whatever, but colorism wise, maybe you look really white. Okay.
So like a real pain in the ass working with an operating definition of race that actually works for people?
It is. It's And so like, Lyman is king of the Census Bureau and gets to do whatever he wants. I would replace our current codes with, I would say, first, here is like a color swatch, like of like 32 skin tones, hold it up to like a hairless patch of skin that is not tanned. Like hold it up to your inner thigh and like match the color swatch. And like that's one piece of data. And then secondly,
quite a job for the
like,
census worker. Okay.
and then tell us like what is your ancestry? You must check at least, like tell us your father's ancestry, your mother's ancestry. You can check multiple for each. You must check something for each. Like that's what I would do, because I think there is like colorist. There are cases where we really care about colorism.
Yeah.
Like, because there's like visual discrimination.
Yeah.
There's, colorism matters for some social outcomes. And then ancestryism matters for other things. And we care about both. And right now we just kind of squish them together as like one concept that we call race. And I think we need to just get rid of that.
I find myself somewhat skeptical of melanization on its own. I mean, I think especially being in California, encountering so many like very white collar, like South Asians. Some of them are very dark, but have like very, Caucasian, Eurasian features, right? And are very assimilated. Like, when you encounter someone with African ancestry with albinism, right? Like I do think like the typical American is going to clock them as African, right? Like regardless of melanin. But do you still think like
I don't know.
Skin color is a good proxy in that environment?
I think that there is enough reason to worry that colorism may operate in people's judgments.
Okay.
That it makes sense to continue tracking it for a period of time. And I think it's more straightforward than a lot of the racial judgments we make.
Yeah.
Because like race, like, and then you get things like, I mean, like Mamdani's thing, like, oh, I'm Indian and African.
Yeah.
And you're like,
that was so funny.
Like my first child was born in Hong Kong. Is she Asian?
Maybe.
And
what are we all here in California? When we're,
right?
when
Yeah,
we're mixed together. If we're not allowed to be native to America per se.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So I think
you asked Herodotus, like, what are the main races of the world? It wouldn't.
They're
look
quite
like
different.
U.S. Census categories.
Yeah.
I don't even think.
I mean, like Romans had a very. I mean, there's some things like, Romans or Greeks, they would have recognized sub-Saharan Africans as different. They did. Yeah. But like Romans very clearly thought that the Germans were a totally different, like totally different than them. Whereas we're like, white.
It's so funny. Sometimes I get nerd sniped into debating like defense of the West guys online, like these like very like trad values, like, and so I'll always ask for like, like when does the West start for you, right? And they'll usually start like sometimes they'll start with Alexander, sometimes they'll start somewhere around there. And
no one is like, when does the West start? The Cucuteni Triphylia culture in the European Neolithic. And I'm like, but that's the correct answer.
Those people drawing those cave paintings like 35,000 years ago in France. And then I'll say, look, man, you realize like for the majority of the period you're talking about, like because they're almost always like some German stock guy from like the Midwest. Nothing against the Midwest. But this is what they are. I'll say, you realize you were like arch enemies of the West for most of its existence, right?
Yes,
as a German.
You were the Oriental barbarian.
Yes.
When they said that, they meant you.
Which kind of suggests
which is why in World War I we still called you the Hun.
Oh yeah. Like I realized this. I was reading through old propaganda. I realized basically everyone like west of Asia, they use this rhetoric of like everyone east of me is a Hun or barbarian. Like you've seen the English use this on the French, you've seen the French use this on the Germans, you've seen the Germans
except the Chinese who say everyone west of them is a barbarian.
Yes, exactly. So. It's just that something's going on in that step there that's just stirring up trouble. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can't actually make a kind of interesting argument about like what pastoralism does to a culture.
Hmm.
I'm like kind of anti-pastoralist, which is funny because like my wife and I did a whole genome sequencing a while back, and my wife is German. I'm Anglo. I'm about as like white Anglo-Saxon Protestant as you can get culturally, and in some ways genetically. But like my wife, for like, there's a number of alleles that like they are super typical of early European Neolithic farmers. And then there's other alleles that we know are very typical of these like Yamnaya Horizon pastoralists in the European Bronze Age who like invaded in, killed all the men, took all the women. Okay. And like there's like 10 or 20 of these you can look at, and they're like very prototypical. Like this is the Neolithic farmer one. This is the Yamnaya Horizon one. And so like I did this for my wife and I. She had like all of the Neolithic farmer ones, and I had like all of the barbarian pastoralist ones. And I'm like, somehow we managed to be like crazy isolates of our type.
That's so funny.
And yet she's the German and I'm the Anglo.
The Anglo.
I have no idea how I got on that, other than I guess to say that I am a barbarian.
Well,
but no, I mean,
you
you can make an argument like pastoralism is bad. So yeah, we're just replicating the European Bronze Age in our household.
So I have a question about, getting back to fertility for a second.
Yes, we've gone far from fertility.
I mean, I'm a sucker for ancient Bronze Age demographics as much as anyone. But if I know we've been talking for about an hour, and usually these run for about an hour and a half, and I want to make sure we get a chance to ask you this, which is, if we wanted to increase fertility, kind of raise effective birth rates, like, do we know how to do it? Like, do we even know how to find out how to do it?
Yeah.
Like, what's the prognosis? Like, if we wanted to fix this, if we all agree that this is something that needs to be fixed, like, what's step one, maybe step 2 and 3, if there are steps 2 and 3.
So we could probably do it just by spending a crap ton of money on child allowances. But I do want to emphasize it would be a lot. So we have about 60 studies that have looked at what happens to birth rates when you give people money or when you take money away from people. And they find a pretty consistent elasticity. That is, fertility responds to financial benefits in a consistent way. The formula is a little bit complicated. Every time I say it somewhere, every time I say it or write it, people immediately misinterpret it or like, this is crazy. So I'll give you the upshot of it. The upshot is, let's say you're Taiwan.
Yeah.
And you have, like fertility below 1.
Okay.
What share of your GDP would you have to spend every year, or it's like you're South Korea or something? What share of your GDP would you have to spend every year for just pure dropping money on parents to get you to replacement rate? Okay. The answer is you need to spend at least 9% and perhaps as much as 21% of your annual economic output on child allowances. And you would probably need to pay for it by taxing people who don't have children at home. That is, unmarried or like childless people and retirees. Okay.
That's actually not as bad as I was expecting.
Yeah. So people have two different reactions to this. One reaction is they're like, that's clearly insane. We would never spend 10% of GDP on babies. Other people are like, we spend 11% of GDP on healthcare, of which 5% of it is public money for retire. Is just Medicare.
1% is like dialysis, which doesn't even work.
Yeah.
We spend 1% of the federal budget on dialysis, which extends life by 16 days.
Yeah. So like, it's one of these weird numbers where like, and so that's like Taiwan or South Korea. Okay. Yeah. The US is even less. So it's one of these. Now I should say that's in addition to current spending. Okay. So I'm not saying you could, you can already count child tax credits that were already, no. The way these studies worked out would have to be in addition to status quo. And again, you can't pay for it by taking away other kid benefits. You'd have to pay for it by taxing people who don't have kids at home. Okay.
So let me ask you. Sorry, do you have? Go ahead and finish up.
No, I mean, I just want to emphasize, like, the research we have suggests that should work. I want to be realistic. No country's going to do that. I would love to see
Yeah,
country try.
I don't know. The Overton window is doing crazy things, man. It's flashing all over the place.
We will see. But it's one of these numbers that it seems really unreasonable until you start to think about it. And then you go, like, is 10% of GDP really crazy for having a next generation?
So
also, if you do the individual math, like if you just do the math, and I'll say people are sometimes like, why would that really work? If you do the math for like a hypothetical middle income couple in the US of like current tax and benefits versus like under the system I'm describing, like what they would actually pay, what you realize is it basically means that, like, if you imagine like a higher and a lower earner makes maybe 65,000, the lower earner makes like anywhere from 30 to 50,000, somewhere in there. It's like a pretty typical couple's earning potential.
Sure.
In the US. What you realize is under our current system, they are best off having 2 earners and no kids. Okay. Like that's their best total budget constraint. Under the system I'm proposing, they actually become best off having 1 earner and like 2 kids or 3 kids.
Right.
That like you actually realize what you're functionally saying is you have to make it that having 2 or 3 kids is actually more lucrative than having like a lower earner spouse.
Yeah.
And so you're actually literally just like paying a middle-class job to be a stay-at-home parent. Like that's actually how the math works out. And when you frame it that way, you're like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense
to me because there's so much spillover benefit to society that's not captured like directly by the mother or whoever the stay-at-home parent is, right? Like it seems obvious that if they're essentially acting as a civil servant by raising a child who's going to become a taxpayer, that you want to give them some sort of like stipend, right? For taking the opportunity cost of not being a private sector worker and instead like raising a citizen, you know, like this should be like paid.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kenny.
So so first of all, when I think about how much, when I think about my parents, the percentage that they spent on me and my brothers when we were growing up, when I think of my friends and other people in my family and how much they've spent on their kids, I feel like 10% of their family budget would be a very conservative estimate. I think kids seem to be a lot more expensive. I don't have kids myself. They seem to be a lot more expensive. When I forecast having kids in my future, if my like kid budget was 10% of my like post-tax earnings, I would be like, wow, that's actually not a bad deal.
Yeah.
But they're not going to private school. They're not going to summer camp. They're not doing any of that stuff.
Yeah.
If that's the budget.
I mean, like, it's just groceries is kind of a lot.
Yeah.
And also just having a bigger house, having extra bedrooms. I mean, and I wonder, like, if we went back into the Middle Ages, or some historical time period in the past where we didn't have like a fertility crisis, what percent of GDP was spent on, you know, people below childbearing age?
Yeah, calculating GDP in that kind of society is very, very tricky. But I think that the key thing to understand is in historic societies, what's really going on is parents had reasons to invest in having lots of kids because they could capture the earnings of the kids, right? And in some sense, they needed to capture the earnings of the kids, whereas now they don't need to, and they can't anyways. All of society captures the earnings. So that's quite a considerable difference. Now, I do want to say we could spend our way to replacement rate. It would be very expensive. It would require considerable political ruptures with our current arrangement. Right now, we spend, on average, 3 times as much per year of retired life as we do under age 18 life in terms of public spending. So like 1 year of a retiree's life, we spend 3 times as much as 1 year of an under 18 life.
And that's even though public school is quite expensive per child.
Yeah, that's including public school. That's including public school. Okay. Yeah. And all the tax benefits and Medicaid and CHIP and all that stuff. So, a world where that ratio flips and we're spending twice as much on kids is just, that'd be a big political lift. So secondarily, There are other things we can do. We could just get rid of marriage penalties in the tax code because marriage is a big part of the problem, right? People just aren't marrying. And we punish people for getting married, particularly working class people. They lose benefits. They face worse tax treatment if they have two earners in the house. If they have two modest income earners in the house, you have huge marriage penalties. We could think about tweaking how retirement works, right? Maybe we should have a portion of your Social Security benefit be calculated based on the earnings of your descendants. Because that's what's actually contributing to Social Security is your descendants.
I want to throw something at you that I hear from the antinatalists, because if they're listening, I'm sure they would like to be represented. It ties into this idea of, capturing your children's income or perpetual population growth. The cliche that you hear is like, oh, it's a pyramid scheme. You've created a pyramid scheme, and the implication is, since a pyramid scheme is fraudulent, this must be fraudulent too, and thus deserve to collapse. Like, how do you respond to something like that?
Yeah, two ways. First of all, the prototypical feature of a pyramid scheme is that the underlying asset isn't really valuable. Okay, that the only real source of benefit in it is the extra people signing on to the program.
Right.
Okay. So for example, let's say, you're a multi-level marketing thing. Maybe you sell let's say you're selling high-end kitchen knives. Not that there would be a business that would do that. Maybe you're never really going to make real money selling the knives themselves. You make the real money recruiting other people to sell the knives for you. And then you want to get the people under you recruiting people to sell knives for them so that you move farther. Okay. And it's this multi-level thing. Now, if the knives are actually valuable, if people actually just really love these knives and there's really a market for those knives, this is not a pyramid scheme. Okay. Now it's multi-level marketing. We might dislike it for various reasons, but there's a real asset. So let's think about, but if it's nothing, if it's, non-fungible tokens, it's something of no real value. It's a pyramid scheme. Okay. What are humans?
Hold on, Lyman. I just want to. There's a reason why Kyler and I are kind of chuckling to ourselves. Is that at one point we did launch our own non-fungible.
And you know what? We did our best to financialize it. We said, okay, this is not just a piece of fake art. This is something that is actually going to have an economic function within a system. Okay.
But so then you understood that the fundamental problem is that intrinsically it had no function. Okay. So you got to ask, what are people? Do people actually have value? And the answer is obviously yes. You add more people, it is not just another person in the pyramid scheme. People make things. People produce. People add value of their own. People are the ultimate resource. It's like saying all investment is a pyramid scheme because, it depends on future returns. Well, it depends on future returns. That's what investment is.
That's what we're doing.
Now, secondly, I would say maybe you do think all investment is a pyramid scheme. Okay, there are people just hardcore anti-growth people who are no, there are energy limits to the cosmos. And because there's a hypothetical limit somewhere, we should stop growing now.
It's a pyramid scheme because we're going to get to Kardashev 10 and we're going to run out of universe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you know what? Look, as absurd as I find it, I want to take it at face value. Say, okay, now imagine a pyramid scheme and ask yourself, which is worse? If the pyramid scheme stops recruiting members right now, or if we just kind of slowly scale, if each level of the pyramid is just slightly smaller. And it's clearly worse. So imagine what was Sam Bankman-Fried's fund again?
FTX.
There you go, FTX. So you can kind of keep the pyramid going as long as nobody calls it and pulls all their money out. Okay. Sure. And if FTX had been able to keep the gravy train going, they would have been loaded today because of their investment in Anthropic. Okay. The problem is everybody realized what it was at once and they pulled out.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's maybe humanity is a pyramid scheme, but you don't want everyone pulling out all at once.
Uh-huh.
Okay, you don't want a
Not
run
good
on
for
human
fertility
civilization.
for everyone to pull out at once. No.
But the point is, like, you know, I don't think it's a pyramid scheme. But even if it is, you really need people to keep investing in it for at least a few more generations, or at least to not all stop at the same time. And what we see right now is around the world, like everyone's stopping at the same time, and that is a disaster scenario where you end up with a situation where you just can't make it work. Like a gradual fertility decline, you can imagine a situation where like gradual technology increase offsets it.
Yeah.
But a really abrupt fertility decline, where like in the space of 10 years, the cohort entering the workforce shrinks by 50%, which is what some countries are facing.
What are the countries
There's
to
no
watch
productivity
for a preview of what this looks like?
Oh, I mean places like Korea, Taiwan. I mean
think they
Japan
are
somewhat,
going
although
to
Japan's actually doing
break
better than some.
and start mass immigration? And at what point will that happen?
They are already bringing in more immigrants. They are already doing so. And they have for many years. You know, you think about domestic workers. South Korea is just opening up for domestic workers now.
Right.
All these countries, Japan's already increasing its immigration. And you know, these early fertility decline countries will probably skate through because they will be able to recruit enough immigrants. The more interesting ones to watch are going to be places like India, Bangladesh, Thailand, where they're not going to be able to recruit enough immigrants. There just aren't enough immigrants, for one thing. The other countries are going to be wanting a lot of the best, highest quality immigrants. They don't have high enough wages to attract tons of immigrants.
Is this going to uplift the market value of being a person from an undeveloped country if all of a sudden it's a buyer's market for human beings as far as immigration?
Yeah, it will. Yeah, I mean, fertility decline in the rich countries absolutely should cause you to believe that the relative standard of living of educated people in poor countries will go up a lot. The absolute standard of living may decline. Because if the innovative growth engines of the world are slowing down, everyone suffers. But their relative standard of living might go up.
I think there are certain people.
Let me say, for the ones who are able to migrate, for the ones who are left behind, you're like twice as screwed.
Twice as screwed, yes.
Yeah. So, given how important immigration might be for future demographics in countries with slowing birth rates today, this might be a loaded question, and we can skate over this. But immigration policy in the United States, how do you feel about it as a demographer?
You know, I'm all for. I would like to see way more skilled immigration. I would like to see a lot more of that. And also, the U.S. needs a lot of low-skilled immigration that I would like to see better regulated through more appropriate guest worker programs, or even like long-term visas for low-skilled workers, but who pass other vetting procedures. I think that's all. Like, I'm not anti-immigrant. I am very anti-crime. And I think like for me, I'm like, look, I would say deport 100% of illegal immigrants and then let them all back in on a guest worker program. My problem is not the being here. My problem is the like collapse of the rule of law that is implied by having like 3 to 5% of the population of the country being illegal immigrants. It's an intolerable state in my view. So I'm like, you know, the most like boring, like Twitter intolerable, like big immigration compromise reform person ever. That I'm like, we need to build the wall and deport the criminals and have a pathway to citizenship for the productive, like the most like cringe immigration reform compromise you can imagine. That's me.
Just a stone cold blue dog out here for the center path.
I'm a totally unreconstructed immigration reformist. So 10 years of immigration chaos have not budged me.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, thank you for answering that. I was curious, do you find being online, there's this sort of like culture war, gravitational singularity that anyone interacting with this sort of high salient stuff, we talked about this a little with Trace Woodgrains, like it's always pulling you toward it. Like, how do you navigate your relationship with the culture war?
Probably not very well. I tend to get drawn into fights on Twitter that my wife, my colleagues, anyone that values my productivity would prefer I focus on other things. So I'm not going to say that I'm a sage guide on how to wisely navigate online.
That's not good, because I use you a little bit.
Probably waste too much time
as a reference for how to compose myself. So, okay, all right, noted.
I probably waste too much time on it. So,
well, in a way, it's, we talk in marketing. We talk about funnels. You have the bottom, the middle, the top of the funnel. I think a tweet, it's like a very short essay, right? It's like the very top of the funnel. Certainly, we wouldn't have had you on our radar without your Twitter presence. So I hope that draws people to this, and this in turn sends people to your longer form work, and that you find all of that useful for your goals and your career. I mean, that would be ideal. That's like a symbiotic relationship, if non-monetary.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's about all I had, honestly, unless there's anything else you want to get into, Kenny. I think that was an awesome, very, very thorough chat. Lyman, I want to give you the chance to plug what you're working on, and say someone doesn't really know who you are, but they like this episode. Where should they go to follow you and get more of what you do?
Yeah, I mean, a great place to go is just the Institute for Family Studies website. We've got a blog where we're always publishing content on family life and demography in America. So that's a good place to go. Beyond that, I have a Substack under my name, Lyman Stone, and I tweet as Lyman Stone KY.
You have Chinese or
generally
something
speaking,
in your name, right? What does the Chinese mean?
Yeah. Sak Loiman. It's Cantonese. It technically means stone arriving immigrant. But it was my assigned name when I lived in Hong Kong, because I was teaching in a Chinese institution. They gave me a Chinese name. And they're like, it kind of sounds like Lyman, and it's kind of a funny meaning too. It's like, you foreigner.
They give you like a
basically it's like, hi, I'm a foreigner. Yeah, they gave me a pun name. So yeah.
Cool. And what is the buffalo? You also have a buffalo.
Sorry. For like conservative Lutherans on Twitter, we tend to mark ourselves with the buffalo.
Is that a sort of distinct social group, conservative Lutherans in particular?
Yeah. We know each other.
Okay, well, that satisfies my curiosity. Lyman, thank you so much for coming on. If you enjoyed this talk, listeners, please do go find him on Twitter. Go find his institute website. Check all that out. If you would like to sponsor the show, this is where your sponsor message will go. So please consider going to futuristletters.com. You can advertise in the journal. You can also advertise on the podcast. And all of that helps us stay up with our weekly episodes. So if you would like to listen to the after show, Kenny and I will be jumping into that. So please stick around. You can find it again on Substack, futuristletters.com. We're going to be talking about how this went, reflecting, chatting, being our silly selves. So just throw a couple bucks at Futurist Letters you'll get access to all the behind the scenes of the journal and also of the show. We have a lot of great content coming out on both fronts, so please stick around, be a friend. If you are a paying subscriber, you can also comment, and we welcome your questions, your guest suggestions, your polite criticisms, anything you want to say. So be a friend. We want to hear it. Thank you very much for listening and watching, and we will see you next week. Thanks, Kenny, and thanks, Lyman.
Thank you.
Thank you.